Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our international manners class. Right now, we are still talking about cross-cultural understanding, and the subunit that we are going to discuss today is intercultural communication. Last week, we also had discussed about this a little bit, but now I'm trying to give some explanation about the barriers or the problems that might arise in intercultural communication. So as we know that intercultural communications means that we have to involve uh, the cultural values such as norms, customs, and languages, and so on and so forth. Because we have different cultures, that means we need to be able to understand uh, the different entities within the cultures itself. For example, the problem in intercultural communication usually come from the problems in the transmissions of the message. So in communication between people of the same culture, usually the person receives the message, they will interpret based on their own values. So based on their own values, and also they will interpret based on their belief systems, and also the behavior that is expected within their own cultures. And when this happens, the way the message is interpreted differently. For example, when you see something, when you see a ceremony, for example, in Bali, this ceremony has never been done or executed in your culture because you come from different cultures. So when the first time you see that the Balinese have to, let's say, make offerings with fruits, with vegetable, with money, with cigarettes, and you will transmit in your brain, you will transmit this message into your cognitive space. Therefore, you will interpret this kind of activities with various interpretation, right? And also, when the receiver of the message is a person from different culture, the receiver uses information from his or her own culture to interpret the message, right? Just like I have told you earlier that when we come from different culture and then we encounter new culture and then we see there is a ceremony going on in that kind of culture, then we have tendency to compare. Oh, in my culture we don't find this kind of thing. Oh, this practice of culture is very fascinating because it is very colorful. In my culture we don't have this kind of cultural practice, and so on and so forth. So the message that the receiver interprets may be very different from the speaker intended. Okay, so that's why today we are going to discuss about the barriers of the intercultural communication. So barriers in bahasa Indonesia kita sebut sebagai batasan, tantangan, and so on and so forth. So barriers mean tantangan dalam komunikasi lintas budaya. Ya, barriers in intercultural communication is best translated into bahasa Indonesia as tantangan dalam komunikasi lintas budaya. So the first one is attitude. Yeah, you have to write down. The first one is attitude. The first barrier in intercultural communication is what we call as attitude. Of course, everyone comes with different attitude toward anything. Yeah, my attitude toward other people would be different when I meet you or when I meet someone else. Okay, but what makes attitude becomes the barriers, one of the barriers in intercultural communication, because we were born with unique attitudes, all of us. But sometimes our attitude has been classified into certain stereotyping, right? So, for example, we have learned stereotyping before because you have to learn about stereotyping before you try to understand what the intercultural communication is. So when we discuss about stereotyping, stereotyping means what we perceive about one culture or one action or activity from other culture, then we tend to generalize that kind of activities into the trademark of that certain culture. So I think you understand about this kind of activity, yeah. Uh, let's go back to what makes attitude one of the reasons of intercultural communication. First, because we were born with unique attitude, yeah, and then our unique attitude were all classified into one certain culture. For example, you are coming from uh, Javanese tribe, you are Acehese, you are Malay, you are Bataknese, you are Papuan. Each of these tribe, they have their own attitudes, and the people who have uh, this tribe in their blood also will reflect the attitudes of their tribe. Yeah. So, for example, maybe you will think that some cultural practice that you have never seen before in your culture um, a little bit strange, yeah, a little bit strange first, because when you have this kind of attitude, oh, that is a very strange activity. It is normal because you have never seen it before. But all you have to embrace in yourself is the readiness, yeah, the readiness to embrace and to experience, to see the cultures which are not yours, okay, which are not yours. So having this narrow-minded attitude, for example, ya, narrow-minded, kalau dalam bahasa Indonesia we can say orang yang berpikiran sempit, ya, narrow-minded. So when you have this kind of narrow-minded attitude, you will reject any kinds of new experiences, any kind of new activities, any kind of new knowledge, information that are extracted from the new culture, right? Because you have this kind of narrow-minded activity. Kamu tuh orangnya pemikirannya itu bisa dibilang sempit. You don't want to accept any other things beside your own, except your own culture. So you think that every culture in the world is wrong, yeah, and the most suitable culture is your own culture. So this kind of attitude would produce a rejection in yourself, yeah. And it is also very dangerous if you want to go somewhere else, if you want to go to a new place, if you want to go to new countries to visit and to experience many new things, but you are not ready yet, and you have this kind of attitude which makes you reject this kind of experience, you will have problems in terms of integrating with the new society, yeah, in terms of integrating into new society. All right, so I hope you have this comprehension about becoming or having the attitude which welcomes the differences. It is also very much related with the tolerance, ya. Ini juga sangat berkaitan dengan toleransi, right? So when you have this open-minded attitude, yeah, so the opposite of narrow-minded is of course open-minded. This open-minded attitude will guide you, will lead you to the whole new experiences of exploring new cultures. It doesn't mean that you have to change yourself to be that, or to have, or to possess the new culture. Your role is right now is only to embrace the new things that might be additional information for your life, for your experience, for your a life journey that might be useful to be used maybe later in the future. We never know, right? We never know. Okay, for example, in Bataknese society, there is a ceremony which is called as Mangun Kaholi. Yeah, Mangun Kaholi. I believe that some of you also just heard this for the first time. Yeah, Mangun Kaholi. So Mangun Kaholi is actually a Bataknese practice. Yeah, it is actually a ceremony where you have to dig up. Yeah, you have to dig up your great grandfather's bones, and then you wash it. You wash the bones, every bones in detail, and after you collect all of the bones, you move the bones to the new place. Yeah, all together with the member or the family members of your great grandfathers who had departed earlier. So this is a practice that you'll never see maybe in your culture, but in Bataknese culture they have that kind of thing, right? And maybe for the people who experience this kind of ceremony, or who attended the ceremony for the first time, they would think that what is the point of removing all the bones from the graveyard to the new graveyard, or to the new concrete or building. So there is a philosophical things, of course, in Bataknese society, why they do this kind of practice, because every culture has its own storyline. Every culture has its own uniqueness, and every culture has its own belief system. That they just believe if we remove these bones to a new places, it will remove the souls. Yeah, it will remove the souls, or it will elevate the souls to a higher divine place. Yeah, to a higher divine place. Let's say heaven. So this is the philosophical things behind that kind of activities. And there's also an example in Toraja. In Toraja community, Toraja is located in the South Sulawesi. It is very near to Makassar or Ujung Pandang. So Toraja people also almost have the same kind of cultural practice with Mangun Kaholi. So they try to dig up their great grandfathers or grandmothers' bones, and they try to wash the bones. But here the special thing is they put some new clothes to the bones, as if the bones are alive. So after that, they would make these bones like they are walking, like they are having souls. And then they will move these bones into the hills, which is a high place, a higher place, which bring us into a deep explanation, a deep comprehension that our mind will say that, oh, they put or move the bones from the ground to the hill to make their position higher than the common people or the people who are still alive. And that also means that these these bones are now very close to their creators, because that's why they were placed into a higher place, like in the hill or in the valley. So this have a meaning. This has an explanation that you have to know, that you have to embrace. And if you have this narrow-minded attitude, you will never understand why these people are doing this kind of activity. All right, so I hope you also can find one example, maybe in your culture. So this is the homework. Yeah, remember, the homework is you have to ask your parents, your mom or your father, the cultural practice atau praktik budaya or cultural practice that they have done it when they were young, but you have never done. Yeah, you have never done it, but your parents did or have done before. Okay, then next week we will discuss your finding. So you have to interview your parents, or maybe your grandparents, or maybe your aunties, what kind of activities that they had performed in terms of cultural activities in the past, but you have never done that before. Kamu belum pernah, gitu ya. So please figure it out, ya. I'm begging you. And then next week we will discuss. Okay. I'm also will give you. I'm going also to give you another example. Yeah, another example. In Indian community, they used to have uh, yeah, a ceremony called sati. Yeah, sati. Sathi. Sati. What does it mean? It's a little bit creepy if you think that in modern society right now this kind of practice is still exists. Maybe you will shivering because when I'm talking about this, I'm also got my nerve on. I mean, like, uh, yes, it doesn't, it makes no logic explanation because sati means that this is particularly intended to women, married women, yeah, married women. If your husband uh, dies, if your husband dies, and Indian will burn, right, the body, right? That's what we call as cremation. And you also have to go with your husband. You also have to burn yourself for the symbol that you are a very royal and loyal wife. You are a very obedient wife, so that if your husband dies, then you also have to be burned alive. This kind of practice happens in India, and you cannot blame that. You cannot blame why this kind of activity was happening in the past. I don't know in this society, today's society, this kind of practice is still available or not, but in late 70s and 80s, they were still perform this kind of activities called sati. Sati means the sacrifice of love, yeah, pengorbanan cinta. If you love your husband that much, and if your husband dies, you have to go with him all together. You will burn alive. Yeah, that kind of thing is what's happening in India. So the point is, when you see this kind of thing, maybe you will think that, oh, that's a crazy activity, that's a crazy cultural activity, but you cannot say so. You cannot say that it is crazy. Maybe you will think that it is a crazy practice, but they have been practiced this kind of activity for quite some time, for 1,000 years ago, and for them maybe it is like the true epitome, the true realization that I do really love my husband and I want myself to die with him, so I will burn myself together with my husband who had died earlier. See? So when you see this kind of things or activities, you cannot blame. If you have this narrow-minded attitude, so you'll not be able to understand the reason behind this kind of activity. Yeah, I hope you understand. Yeah, so that's number one. The barriers to intercultural communication is having an attitude. Okay. If you have any question, you can drop me in the WhatsApp group. Yeah, you can drop the questions in our WhatsApp group, so I will answer in our group. Right. And the second one is perception. Yeah, the second one after attitude, the second one is perception. So perception is one of the barriers in intercultural communication, because the fact that people perceive the same thing in different ways, yeah, is particularly important in intercultural communication. For example, my perception toward a movie and my friend's perception toward the same movie that we watched together would be different. Yeah. Also, if you are watching one movie together with your friends, if you watch a movie together with your friends, after watching this movie you discussed with your friends, you might find that your opinions would be different. Yeah, I can guarantee that, because our perception, yeah, people's perception is very different. Yeah. Each of us has unique perception. That you have to bear in mind. You always have to remember this thing. Yeah. So the perception is also very much related with the cognitive process. What does it mean by cognitive process? So the cognitive process is when you're trying to grasp all the information in your head, and there is a process of understanding, the process of comprehending, the process of believing, and eventually you will come with a perception. Yeah, before there is a perception, there is a cognitive process. Yeah, for example, after let's say attending one ceremony, cultural ceremony that you have never seen before, you would make a perception. Yeah, but before you make a perception, there is a cognitive process, the thinking process. Yeah, the process where you have to understand, to comprehend, to analyze, to identify, and so on and so forth in your brain until you come to the perception of your own. Okay, so yes, the way we perceive, yeah, is culturally determined. Yeah, and the general lack of awareness of this is another barrier to intercultural communication. So basically, if you have this kind of lacking, yeah, the lack of awareness when you perceive something, so you would also process the perception, and the result will also be very different with one and another. So that's why perception could be one of the barriers in intercultural communication. For example, what is your perception about the Papuan cultures? Yeah, there is a culture or a cultural practice, yeah, in Papua when one of the family members passes away, you have to cut, yeah, one of your fingers. What is your perception about that? Yes, it's really happening in Papua. In Papua, there is one tribe or two or three tribes that believe if someone dies, particularly your family members, you have to cut down your fingers, one of your fingers, to show that as a remembrance, as a memoir, yeah, that once you used to have a family members of yours, but now they are gone. So what's your kind of perception about this kind of practice? Of course, right now, you won't do that. You won't do that. And you're not part of the Papuan culture, right? And when you see this kind of things and it's still happening in Papua, then you feel you will have your own perception. Oh, I will not do that even though one of my family members passes away. I will just pray for him and just will pray that he will be accepted or she will be accepted in the God's grace. So you will think about that, right? But the perception just comes out. But perception can also be controlled and managed. Yeah, perception can also be controlled and managed. If you have this attitude where you can accept differences, you will find it interesting and fascinating. You will find it amazing how people can really obedience, how people can really devote it to cut, yeah, one of his or her fingers to remember the people who had gone. This is amazing thing actually. If you are having a narrow-minded attitude, you will feel your perception will be, oh, this culture is bad. You will say that way. Okay. So number 3, after the perception, the barriers of intercultural communication is stereotype. So I think we also have learned this stereotyping last weeks and last 2 weeks. Yeah. So I don't think that we have problems. I don't think I have problems to explain it again because I know you have understood what's the meaning of stereotyping. And as you know, stereotyping has positive stereotyping and negative stereotyping. And stereotyping can also be controlled. Stereotyping can also be managed. Yeah, but stereotyping also one of the dangerous things if you cannot control and manage, because stereotyping will lead you to the intolerance, will lead you to prejudice, and so on and so forth. Well, I think that's all for today. Thank you so much. We will be meeting again next week. I'm so sorry I couldn't meet you online today because I have class. One of my professors moved the schedule to 4:30, so I don't think I would have time to attend our Google meeting. That's why I recorded this for you. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, and please do not forget to make your homework. Ask your parents, is there any cultural activities that they had done when they were young but you have never done? Okay. Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day and stay healthy. Bye bye.